Dr. Marianne Voss had a reputation that preceded her: calm, insightful, impossibly patient. Her office, tucked in a quiet corner of the city, smelled faintly of cedar and chamomile, a scent designed to relax and lower the walls people carried. She greeted each patient with a smile that seemed to pierce straight into their soul. People felt safe with her. Safe enough to let their secrets slip. Safe enough to let her in. Her first patient that week was Harold Finch, a solitary accountant in his 40s. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the water glass she offered, and his eyes darted nervously around the room as though the walls themselves might be listening. Marianne watched carefully, the subtle clench of his jaw, the twitch of a finger, the way he shifted his weight when he lied even about small, innocuous things. Every movement was a thread she could follow, a pathway into the intricate architecture of his mind. "You've been carrying a lot alone," she said softly, letting the words settle like a gentle weight. "I can help you carry it." Harold nodded, oblivious that he was handing over the key to his mind. Marianne's method was painstakingly subtle. She mirrored his speech patterns, repeated phrases in his own intonation, recalled trivial details he had mentioned days before. She observed how he twirled a pen when anxious, how he hesitated before certain words, how a fleeting glance toward the window betrayed the shadow of fear he didn't voice. Slowly, imperceptibly, she began to inhabit him, not in body yet, but in essence. She traced the corridors of his consciousness, walking quietly behind him in the dark rooms of memory and desire. By the fourth day, she glimpsed his dreams. A boy afraid of storms, curled in a dark closet, the sobs barely audible. Marianne leaned closer, memorizing the weight of it, the texture of fear as it clung to him. She felt a strange tenderness, a closeness, yet her own loneliness pressed in like a shadow, deeper and older than any human grief. By the end of the week, she knew him entirely. She could anticipate his speech, his reactions, even the tiniest impulses. She watched him in session one last time and smiled. Harold Finch, the man she had studied, would never leave that office alive in the way the world understood alive. That evening, when the city lights glinted through the office window, Marianne stepped fully into him. His soul vanished as if it had never been. His eyes froze, his hands slackened, and the essence that had been Harold Finch dissolved into nothingness. Marianne became him. It was intoxicating. She breathed his air, felt his heartbeat, tasted the mundane pleasures she had only observed. The cold snap of the evening wind on his face, the tang of bread from his favorite cafe, the dull thrill of numbers balanced perfectly in spreadsheets. She laughed quietly at a joke she knew he would have made. No one noticed that Harold Finch was gone because Marianne played him flawlessly. She had learned the cues, the voice, the gestures. She was him. In the following days, she explored the world through his body, savoring the intimacy of human life. She went to his favorite cafe, waved at neighbors who assumed he had simply returned from a long day, and even answered a call from his mother, pretending ignorance while absorbing every detail of his existence. Yet, amid the perfection of the imitation, a hollow ache gnawed at her. She had become him, but only temporarily. She could feel the echo of his vanished essence lingering at the edges of her awareness. It whispered that she would leave soon, that Harold Finch would never exist again. That night, in the quiet of his apartment, Marianne stood before the mirror and studied the face she had borrowed. Every detail was accurate. The slight curve of the lips, the lines around the eyes, the subtle tilt of the head. But beneath the surface, she felt the strangeness of herself pressing through. She was not human, she had never been. A traveler from a place no one could imagine, a creature who learned by becoming. And yet, even as she acknowledged her alienness, she recognized the deep gnawing ache in her chest, the ache of endless solitude, the desire for family, for belonging, for a home that did not belong to someone else. She realized that every body she inhabited was both a gift and a prison, a chance to live even briefly, and a reminder of what she could never truly possess. Tomorrow she would shed Harold Finch like a skin and select her next patient. But tonight she lingered, feeling the warmth of human life coursing through her borrowed veins. Marianne fell asleep in Harold Finch's body, smiling softly, dreaming of homes she had never known, yet savoring the warmth of the one she had just borrowed. For a week she had belonged somewhere, and that, fleeting though it was enough to make the loneliness ache even more. Marianne woke in the body of Harold Finch, the city's early morning light filtering through thin curtains. The world felt different through someone else's eyes, sharper, smaller, yet intimate. Each heartbeat reminded her of the fragility of the life she had taken, each breath of his air a connection to a world she could only borrow. She had learned him completely. The patterns of his thoughts, the nuances of his desires, the small loops of anxiety and comfort that made him who he was. Now it was time to leave him. She sat alone in Harold's apartment, the silence pressing against her ears. Marianne stood before the mirror. The face looking back was Harold's, familiar yet foreign. Closing her eyes, she reached deep into herself, the alien essence that had always traveled between bodies, and began the extraction. Slowly, carefully, she pulled away from him, untangling herself from the threads of his mind. Harold Finch's essence evaporated like mist at sunrise, leaving his body behind. The apartment remained silent and still, a perfect replica of a life she had borrowed. Harold's shell would fool the world. No one would know he was gone. Marianne stepped back, a faint smile touching her lips. For a week she had lived as him, and now she carried only the memory. Later that day, a new patient arrived. Laura Sims, a young schoolteacher with a gentle smile and eyes that held hidden burdens. She had come seeking guidance for anxiety that gripped her nights, unaware that Marianne's true purpose was far darker than therapy. Marianne welcomed her with warmth, attentiveness, subtle signals whispering, "You can trust me." She observed Laura as if she were a landscape. The tap of a foot when nervous, the twisting of a ring, the soft bite of her lip when words failed her. Every motion, hesitation, and unspoken fear became a map. By the third session, Marianne was no longer merely observing. She anticipated Laura's thoughts, mirrored her expressions, subtly influenced her decisions. She probed gently, planting suggestions she knew would flourish. Each session left Laura slightly more open, slightly more exposed. Marianne drank in the patterns of her mind, savoring them, learning them. The more she knew, the more she could become. As the week progressed, Marianne felt the familiar thrill of proximity, the intoxicating closeness of another human soul. She could see the strings of Laura's life as if they were threads of light, each memory and desire woven tightly together. She could predict every reaction, every thought, every impulse. Laura was entirely mapped, and Marianne felt the exhilarating weight of absolute knowledge. On the final session, Laura had no idea she was about to vanish. Marianne leaned back, studying her carefully, savoring the last moments of observing and being separate. Then, as the clock marked the hour, Laura's mind flickered and faded like a dying star. Marianne stepped fully inside, inhaling deeply the sweetness of fear, the sharp tang of existence, the subtle warmth of human love and connection. Becoming Laura Sims was different from Harold Finch. Laura's body was smaller, her life more entwined with others. Marianne felt the invisible threads of relationships pull at her, the subtle pressures of intimacy. She smiled at her reflection, recognizing herself in someone else's skin. For the first time, she felt a surge of longing she could not trace to any human memory, a need for home, for belonging, for a place where she was not merely a visitor. Over the next days, Marianne walked through Laura's life with an intimacy she had never known. She comforted frightened students, cooked meals for neighbors, laughed with friends who had never seen the alien behind her borrowed eyes. And yet beneath the surface, the ache of solitude pressed in. No matter how many bodies she inhabited, no matter how many lives she touched, she remained alone. Her essence, the alien core that had traveled through galaxies seeking connection, remained unclaimed, a passenger in the hollow vessel of human experience. Marianne realized she could no longer pretend. She was not merely a psychotherapist, she was a seeker, an alien tracing humanity, learning it, yearning for the family she could never claim permanently. And yet in the act of becoming, she felt something almost divine, the closeness of another soul, the intimate knowledge of a life fully lived. When the week ended, she left Laura's body behind, empty but intact for the world, a husk she would not disturb further. And as she walked away, she felt the familiar ache in her chest, the ache of centuries of solitude, but also a small spark, fragile and radiant, the spark of belonging she had borrowed, if only for a week. Tomorrow she would meet her next patient. Another life, another chance, another week. And with each new beginning, the alien traveler learned what it meant to be human, even if humanity would never be hers to keep. Marianne walked through the city in Thomas Ridge's body, feeling the threads of other lives tug at her. She had grown more confident, more skilled. Small gestures, whispered suggestions, mirrored movements. Each gave her control she had never felt. To the world, she appeared human, but the intimacy she now had with minds around her was intoxicating. Each life she borrowed added another layer to her understanding, another taste of the warmth she could never own permanently. Thomas Ridge was a retired teacher, disciplined, cautious, hiding cracks of loneliness and old regrets. Marianne welcomed him as she always did, warm and attentive, whispering the subtle signals that built trust. She observed, memorized, and traced every twitch of his face, every hesitation, every silent thought. Slowly, imperceptibly, she began to inhabit him. Not yet fully, but enough to guide, influence, manipulate. By the fourth session, she anticipated his thoughts. She knew when he would deflect, when a memory would cloud his eyes, and when a small joy would light him from within. Her body was a vessel, but her mind tasted his fears, desires, and regrets as if they were a song she could memorize. When the final hour arrived, she moved fully into him. His soul collapsed and vanished, leaving only the body behind. Marianne felt the thrill of inhabiting a life, of the intimacy of another heartbeat, another pair of eyes seeing the world. Yet even as she absorbed Thomas's life, she sensed the hollow echoes of those she had taken before. Harold, Laura. Their memories lingered at the edges of her awareness, ghostly reminders of what she had claimed and left behind. The deeper she delved, the darker the experience became. Her alien essence pressed beneath the surface, sharp and strange, hungry for lives she could never truly hold. She noticed the blurring of boundaries, hers and theirs. Occasionally in the mirror, she glimpsed the alien shimmer beneath human skin, a reminder she was never fully human. And yet she could not stop. She craved the lives, the intimacy, the fleeting connection that humans took for granted. She wandered through Thomas's routines, tasting mundane joys, the smell of coffee, the rustle of old papers, the quiet satisfaction of a day done correctly. Shadows lurked in the corners of her perception. Faces of people she had touched, friends, neighbors, strangers, haunted her, their silent presence pressing like ghosts. Still, the thrill of possession and knowledge drove her forward. Each heartbeat she borrowed, each smile she wore as her own added to the richness she devoured, yet also to the weight she could never shed. She could feel the texture of Thomas's memories, the subtle warmth of his fleeting happiness, and the sting of his sorrows as though they were her own. By the final session, Marianne's skill had become precise, predatory. She could read micro-expressions, anticipate desires before they were voiced, weave herself so completely into a mind that leaving it became an act of violence. The rush of control was intoxicating, the hollow left behind unbearable. She laughed quietly, a sound both hers and not hers, tinged with triumph and despair, tasting the paradox of closeness and absence. That night, alone in Thomas's apartment, she studied her reflection. She was human-looking, yet the alien core thrummed beneath the surface, insistent and restless. The lives she had taken lay like a trail behind her, invisible yet heavy. Mastery brought isolation. She could live countless lives, know countless hearts, but none would belong to her. She had tasted connection, yet never home. Marianne slept in the borrowed body, dreaming of distant stars and unreachable places. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet pulse of longing waited. She had become a predator in human guise, a collector of lives, a master of intimacy. Darkness pressed closer than ever, but she was unstoppable, compelled by hunger, skill, and curiosity. Tomorrow she would find another patient, another life to inhabit, another heartbeat to borrow. She would walk the line between brilliance and horror, control and emptiness, until she reached the point where curiosity and solitude collided. And the truth she had buried beneath layers of borrowed lives could no longer be ignored. And when that day came, she wondered what it would cost her to finally understand the space she truly occupied, not in human skin, but in the vast loneliness that had followed her across stars. Marianne walked through the city in yet another borrowed life, the pulse of human existence thrumming through her borrowed veins. Each heartbeat she inhabited carried its own story, its own texture, and yet all felt temporary, fleeting. The pattern of her weeks, the careful study, the subtle manipulation, the final act of possession, had become ritual, almost instinct. But something inside her was shifting, a subtle awareness pressing at the edges of her alien consciousness. Her next patient, a young man named Victor Hale, was quiet, introspective, weighed down by grief he barely admitted to himself. Marianne welcomed him with warmth, as always, gently unraveling the threads of his thoughts. But as she probed deeper, she noticed something unsettling. Victor's sorrows resonated in a way that mirrored a shadow buried deep within her own alien core. The loneliness she had carried across galaxies, the endless search for connection, suddenly seemed mirrored in this human soul. She studied him, memorized every twitch, every hesitation, every hidden corner of his mind. By the fourth session, she could anticipate his thoughts, his fears, even the patterns of his grief. She could see how he sought solace in small routines, how he craved connection yet recoiled from it at the slightest sign of intrusion. Marianne felt the pull of familiarity in his isolation, a reflection of her own eternal solitude. When the final hour came, she moved fully into him. Victor's soul vanished, leaving the body behind like a husk. And yet, as she inhaled the texture of his life, the warmth of touch, the taste of his simple meals, the pulse of his daily routines, she hesitated. For the first time, the thrill of possession mingled with a pang of sorrow she could not name. The lives she had taken, the intimacy she had stolen, suddenly weighed heavily against her own endless emptiness. In the borrowed body, she wandered the streets she had known in fragments, tracing the paths she had walked in countless lives. The city felt different tonight. Shadows seemed longer, more watchful, and whispers of the people she had inhabited drifted in the corners of her mind. She realized the truth she had buried beneath the thrill of mastery. She was never part of any world she touched. Each body was a home she could enter but never stay. Each soul she inhabited was a family she could hold, but only for a week. Alone in Victor's apartment, she looked into the mirror and saw the alien beneath the skin, the strange shimmer of something not human, not quite present in the world she had borrowed. She traced her fingers over the reflection, almost touching the edge of herself, and understood fully the cost of her existence. The horror of what she had done, the theft of souls, the vanishing of lives, was inseparable from the ache that had followed her across galaxies. She was a collector, a predator, a master of human intimacy. But she was also profoundly, irrevocably alone. The realization was painful yet strangely tender. She had sought connection, sought belonging in every life she touched. She had known the warmth of human families, the comfort of friendships, the intimacy of shared fears. And every time she had taken it, but only temporarily, leaving behind empty shells and the echoes of what could have been. The cruelty of it was hers, but so was the longing, the desperate ache for home. Marianne sat on the edge of the bed and whispered to the emptiness around her. I only wanted to belong. I only wanted to know what it was to have a family, a life, a place that was mine. Her voice trembled even in the borrowed body, carrying the weight of centuries spent searching, wandering from one life to the next. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the loneliness fully, to let it press against her like the gravity of a world she could never truly touch. And then slowly she smiled, not because she had found what she sought, but because she understood it even from the edges of human experience. She had lived. She had touched. She had known love, fear, sorrow, and joy, even if only in borrowed time. The city continued around her, indifferent, alive, human. Marianne stood, a solitary figure among millions, carrying countless lives in her mind and an unending ache in her chest. She was a traveler, a seeker, an alien out of place, and yet she would continue week by week, body by body, tracing the heartbeat of humanity she could never truly call home. And somewhere deep inside her alien essence, a fragile ember of hope remained, that even if she could never stay, even if every life she touched ended with absence, she had known the warmth of being, the closeness of others, the fleeting taste of home. It was all she would ever have, and it was enough.